Do you ever wonder how some writers tend to write fast? They can write 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 books a year. How do they do that? Well, today we're going to talk about 6 productivity secrets to help you write faster. Hey, welcome to the Julia Amante channel. If we're just meeting, I am Julia Amante. I'm a women's fiction author. Well, today, let's talk about how to write faster. First, I want to tell you a story. Back when I was in my early 20s, I used to teach elementary school, and I used to be able to write a book in a month. Okay, so I was at a year-round school, which means that 1 month we were off and 3 months we worked. So we would work the 3 months, go off a month, work 3 months, go off a month. And so we didn't have that big summer break, but we had that 1 month, 3 times a year. So it worked perfect for me because at that point I wasn't published yet and I was still working on learning how to write. And so I would write, the first book I wrote probably was really terrible, but I would write for that whole month. And then I would edit for the 3 months. So when I was working, I didn't have the time to really devote to writing so much, but I could rewrite and I could edit and I could make the book better. So that's what I did. So I would get 2 to 3 books written a year. So maybe one of those months we would go on vacation. I wouldn't do that, but at least 2 months that I was off, 2 of those off-track months, I would write. And so I could write 2 to 3 books a year and finish them completely, edited everything, right? So how did I do that? Because what happened over time is I stopped teaching. I stopped teaching elementary school to have my children, take care of my children, and I continued to write while my children were little, but I didn't have that schedule anymore, right? So my whole schedule was didn't have that routine of a schedule. So I had to create my own schedule, which if you have children, you understand, especially when they're little, it's really hard, right? So I ended up writing whenever I could. And then I also changed the type of writing that I was writing. So when I was teaching elementary school, I was writing the shorter, I don't even know, like 250 to 300 max pages of a romance novel. And then later on, I changed to women's fiction where the books were 350 to 400 pages. They were a little longer. They were more complex. They had, subplots and all kinds of other things. And so I went from writing 2 to 3 books a year to writing 1 book a year. And then I started teaching. My kids were older. I went back to college. I started teaching college classes, and I ended up, doing all kinds of things. I was restarting my publishing company, and just my plate just got full of all kinds of obligations. And I've gone from writing 1 book a year to writing 1 book every 2 to 3 years. So that's a problem. And it's a problem for me, and it's a problem really for anybody that wants to publish regularly, right? So you want to write on a regular basis. So you want to let your readers know. It doesn't matter really if it's 2 books a year, if it's 1 book a year, or 1 book every other year, but your readers have to know this is what you're doing, right? I can expect a new book from this writer this year because she wrote 1 last year. She tends to release 1 per year. Or if you release 1 every other year, your readers need to understand that, right? And you need to do other things in between that so that you're keeping your readers engaged. But so for me, I've started asking myself, okay, so why was I so productive at the beginning of my writing career and less productive now? Obviously, it's because of a lot of the time constraints, but it's not just that. So we're going to talk about the 6 things to make you more productive and help you to write faster. And because this is what I've been thinking about, and this is what I plan to do, to release a book this year and another one next year, and so on. Okay, so first, let me talk about a Stephen King book. So I don't know how many of you have read Stephen King's On Writing book. It's really good. I actually have my college students, beginning writing students, read this book because he has a lot of really good things in there. He has a whole, history of how he started writing, and beginning writers tend to think that, that it's easy all the time, that it's easy to get published, that it's easy to write. And, Stephen King goes through like his whole early life when he first started writing and how he would get rejected often and all of that. So it's good for beginning writers to see that, not everybody starts by writing a blockbuster novel, right? We start by getting rejections, trying things, changing things, and anyhow, he has a really good book, right? So, but the one part that I want to talk about today is that he says that writers should write with the door closed and edit with the door open. So, what does he mean by that? And what he's saying is that you should write with the door closed, meaning that you need to leave the critics outside of the door. It's just you and your writing so that you can focus on your writing, and you're not, you're not thinking about what other people are going to say and critiquing yourself and judging your writing before it's time to judge it. And then you open up the door and you kind of allow those metaphorical critics to come in as you're editing. Okay. So I'm going to take that, but I'm going to actually tell you to literally write with your door closed. Okay. So what we need to do as writers to write fast is we need to really focus on what we're writing. If we are writing at the kitchen table, we're writing somewhere where there's all kinds of distractions. There are children, there's dogs, there's people coming to your door, there's your phone buzzing all the time, right? If you have notifications on your phone, turn those off. You do not need to be notified every time your favorite person puts a video up, because that, except for mine, keep my notification on. But you don't want to do that, because at least during the time that you're writing, or turn your phone off. You can get your notifications later, because every time that you're distracted, it takes you away from your story, it takes you away from your writing, and it's harder to get back into it. Okay, so and not all of us. I don't have the time that I had when I was teaching elementary school. I don't have a month of uninterrupted time. Back then, I could write a novel in an entire month, because that's all I did. I wasn't doing my lesson plans. I wasn't grading papers. I didn't have children at the time. I could just focus on writing, and that was my full-time job for that month, and I knew it, right? So, but now I don't have that. So it's, like most people, I have certain amounts of time where I can dedicate to my writing, and so I don't want any other distractions. And so that's what we need to do, because that does help you write faster. If you're focusing on that writing, then that's going to help you. Okay. The second thing that I want you to do is and you don't have to do this, but it's something that might be helpful. So some people are okay with sound. Some people need quiet. But if you can choose music that is inspiring to you, and it doesn't have to be instrumental music or anything. Sometimes I do like that, but it can be anything that you find that is adding to your writing, to the scene, to the mood that you're in for the scene that you're writing is helpful. And that's helpful for a couple of reasons. First, it tunes out everything else. If I have my music on, I'm not hearing everything else that's going on, and that's helpful. But the other reason is that it can inspire you, and it can help you write faster. So depending on the type of music that I'm listening to, I'm really into it, right? And I'm hearing the music and I'm into my scene, and it's just, I'm typing faster. I'm really into it because of the music, because of, it's just encompassing my room, the atmosphere, and it's making its way into my writing. So the first thing, again, is to close that door. And the second thing is to fill up the room with sounds, music, and it can even be sounds of nature if you get distracted by music. But something that blocks out the outdoor or the outside noise. If you really, really don't have a place where you can be by yourself and you can close that door, then you might want to use earbuds or something, so that at least you're doing the second part, which is to keep that noise away from entering your writing consciousness. Okay. All right. The third thing you want to do is put everything else on hold, because we have a lot of things going on in our life, right? But if you're trying to get a book finished and written and you want to write it fast, then postpone things. So there are going to be opportunities. You're going to be invited places to, go out to dinner with somebody, to see friends, to just, do all kinds of things, or other opportunities, or maybe other work-related opportunities, right? But you want to put everything else on hold. If it isn't related to finishing your novel, working at your job, taking care of your family, right? Whatever your immediate goals are, put it aside. Say, okay, within the next 6 months, I'm going to write this book. So within the next 6 months, I'm not going to accept anything else new. I'm not going to take on any new activities. I'm not going to, I'm not going to join this club. I'm not going to volunteer for something, because until this book is finished, this is my one thing. If you want to write faster, you have to focus, right? Closing the door, focusing with music, that is all about not letting anything else come in and really focusing on that story, so that you're living and breathing and always thinking about this story. Okay, so everything else that's not related to finishing your story doesn't get done for the next, however long it takes you. If it's 3 months, then for the next 3 months, you're not doing anything else. If it's 6 months, then it's that, right? And it won't take you a year if you really, really focus. I mean, if it's 6 months, is plenty of time to get an entire novel written if you're really, really focusing. Okay, and the fourth thing is sort of related to this. It's prioritizing the book, so that you are not only not accepting outside things, but you're not getting you're not getting trapped into writing something else. One of the things that tends to happen to writers, and you probably have experienced this, is when you are in the middle of writing a book and you get to some parts that maybe are challenging or difficult, and it doesn't seem like the book is progressing, and you start to think, maybe this isn't the right book. Maybe this isn't the right story. Maybe what I need to do is, I just thought of this amazing idea, this amazing story that I'm gonna leave this aside, and I'm gonna go and write that story, because that is a story that needs to be written right now. Okay, it's really not. Put that idea in, have an idea book, have something, and that's where you're going to put that idea. Write out a paragraph, write out a page if you need to, but put it aside. Because it's very, very tempting, right, to leave the project that's difficult and move on to this nice, shiny new idea that you think is genius. When you go finish your book and you go back to that idea and you're thinking, okay, now I'm going to go back and I'm going to write about that amazing idea that I had. Most likely, unless it really was a genius idea, you're going to go back and say, it really wasn't as great as I thought it was. It was only great because you were trying to get away from the story that you were writing, because that was the one that was difficult, right? Because that was the one that was challenging you. So what you need to do is put that aside, prioritize the book you're writing, work on that book, finish it, even if it ends up that book really wasn't as good as you thought. Even if you end it, you finish it, and you think, oh, see, it wasn't as good as I thought. It might not be, or it might be something that just needs to be edited and rewritten. So don't be hard on yourself when you first finish writing your book. But at least you finished it, and then you can fix what you finished writing. You can't fix what you never finished. Okay, so don't prioritize that book. Don't think of any other stories. Don't write anything else. Even reading, sometimes you have to be careful that you're not getting trapped into, I love to read all the time, and I want you to read all the time as well. But if the reading that you are, if it's distracting you from your story, it's either pulling away, you're thinking that your story is not as good because you're reading another book, or you're feeling like the story is, it's just distracting you from your story, right? You're just thinking about somebody else's story rather than your own. Then put those books aside, read nonfiction, read something else, okay? The next thing that, if you notice, what was I doing when I was writing 2 to 3 books a year? What I was doing was I was giving myself a deadline. I was saying, okay, at the end of this month, I need to have this book finished. So yes, I would sit at my desk and write for 8 and 10 hours. And if you're thinking, geez, she was working, teaching, and this was her 1 month off, and she spent it writing. It was something I wanted to do. It wasn't painful. I loved it. Okay. So, but I had that time, right? So I was thinking, by the end of this month, I need to have this book written and finished, because once I start teaching, it really is going to pull me away from that story. And I wanted it to feel, I didn't want gaps in my thinking. I didn't want my just being distracted from the story and then not being able to come and losing the flow of it. So it was really important for me to get that book written that month. So I gave myself that deadline. By giving myself that deadline, I knew that I had to finish the book. I knew that I had to get that done before I went and started my classes. And during the time that I was teaching, I can come back and fix it and edit it. But that's a different part of your brain, right, that's working. So give yourself a deadline. Anybody who writes fast, they do it because they know they need to get it done by a certain amount of time. They know they don't have an indefinite amount of time. So if you're just sitting there saying, yeah, okay, I'm just going to write, and then, oh yeah, today I got to go do this, so I'm going to leave, and I'll come back, and I'll take care of that. Or yeah, I got invited somewhere, I might as well just I'll write tomorrow after this. If you do that, it's going to take forever. You're not going to write fast. You might not even finish. So by giving yourself that deadline and saying, I need to get this done by such and such date, and then be fair with yourself. I'm saying a month because that's what I had. I no longer think that I can do that just because of my other obligations. But I know I can get one done in a year. And I know that I would probably give myself a 6-month time to write it. And then the second half of the year probably for editing, so that I have the book released within a year, okay, completely finished, so written and edited. So for me, I would give myself 6 months today, right? Because it's a different time than back then. I have other things that I'm doing, but you have to decide what's a reasonable amount of time for you, and then set that deadline, and then stick to that deadline. Okay, so that you know that you have that obligation of getting it done by a certain amount of time. Okay, and then my last suggestion for writing quickly is to write all the time. So what do I mean by that? I'm not saying, I don't mean actually writing all the time, but I mean keeping that story in your mind. So I was saying this earlier, right, that when you are focusing on just that book, right, and nothing else, no other stories, nothing else in your life except for what you absolutely have to do and the book, what's going to happen is this story is going to be occupying your mind a lot, because you're always thinking about coming back and writing. So you might be going to work, right? You might be going to work, and then you are thinking while you're at work, and you're not occupied with work time, you're taking a break or whatever, you're thinking about your story. If you think of anything, have a notebook and write it down. You're going to the grocery store, you're going to get gas, you're thinking of your story. Okay, so have it occupy your time all the time. You're always writing that book, even when you're not sitting there writing the book, because what's going to happen is you're training your brain, and then you are going to think of things all the time, right? You can be taking a shower, you're going to think of something. You're going to be driving your car, you're going to think of something. So that goes, that's going to work in your novel. You're going to think of the scene. You're going to think of, why is this character doing this? That didn't make sense yesterday, but as now I'm sitting at the gas station, now I understand why my character was doing that. I need to go back and write. So you write these things down, and when you get home, you're ready, right, to sit down and write, because you've already been thinking of things all the time. Think of things at night before you go to sleep, right? Think about an issue, a problem, a plot problem, or a character issue that you need to work on. And then as you're sleeping, you hopefully it'll come to you. So when you wake up in the morning, you might have the answer that you didn't have the night before. Sometimes if you're working late and you're getting exhausted, your brain just shuts down, right? But the next morning when it's fresh, if you just kind of sleep on it, it'll come to you. So write all the time, and don't think of writing as actually just writing. Think of it as thinking about the story. Think about taking notes about on the story. All of that is writing. It's writing all the time. It's keeping that story in your mind, so that again, you're kind of obsessing with this story, and then when it's time to sit down and write, you're ready. You're ready to sit down and actually put down the words that you've been thinking, the ideas that you've been thinking. All right. So those are my suggestions for writing faster. That's what I am planning to do with my novel. So I'm planning to release my novel this year, and then beginning a new one right at the beginning. I don't know if it'll be at the beginning of the year. I'll just see how I'm probably going to release my novel in the fall this year. And then start the new one, right? And give myself that 6-month time and focus on just that new book, so that I can I'm fortunate now that I do have my own office and I can close my door and I can put on my music. The only ones that disturb me are my dogs, and there's not much I can do about that. But now I actually can do that, and I can focus on my story, and that's what I plan to do. So hopefully these tips help you. If this is helpful to you, please hit that like button and share the video. And thank you for being with me today. And hope to see you again next week.